You may know that plants produce seeds and pollen in order to create new plants. However, this form of reproduction is not the only way to create new plants. When plants make seeds and pollen, they often use a significant amount of time and energy. Additionally, remember that not all plants make seeds. For plants that do not make seeds, there are many options for making new offspring. We will look at a few of these forms of reproduction, but first, let's understand some general aspects of asexual plant reproduction. Asexual reproduction is when offspring are genetically identical to the parent. Asexual reproduction only requires and only allows for one parent. Most of the time, we think of two parents, a male and a female, making an offspring. However, asexual reproduction only uses one parent. In plants, asexual reproduction is called vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation, like many things, has its advantages and disadvantages. It is beneficial for plants that are well suited for their environment and when the environment is stable. Remember that asexual reproduction results in genetically identical organisms, so these organisms must be well adapted to their environment in order to survive. Because asexual reproduction doesn't allow for evolution and adaptations to occur as frequently as sexual reproduction, vegetative propagation is not advantageous for plants that live in changing environments. In unstable environments, plants that are identical to each other may all die out at once. However, if plants are genetically different, which is a result of sexual reproduction, some plants may survive in an unstable environment. For example, if we have a specific type of plant that grows very well in hot, humid environments, all of the plants may die out if there is a change in the climate. If the temperature or humidity change, the plants that produce asexually are all the same and therefore will all die out because they are not adapted to the new climate. However, a plant that produces sexually will have some diversity in the individual plants, and some may survive this change in temperature or humidity. We also see this in plants that are affected by diseases. Those plants that are genetically identical are more likely to die out than those plants that are genetically diverse. Now that we have explored what vegetative propagation is, as well as some benefits and downsides, let's now look at a few forms of asexual reproduction in plants. We will first look at how bulbs result in vegetative propagation. Generally, you may think of bulbs that you plant in the fall in order to get flowers, such as daffodils or tulips, in the spring. Bulbs are underground buds that have fleshy leaves extending from them. Bulbs are food storage units for future developing plants. Bulbs contain several buds near the node, which is where leaves are produced. These new buds can eventually develop into new plants. If you plant one bulb, you may find that years later you have several plants coming from that one bulb. If you want, you can separate these new bulbs and plant more flowers. Because this one plant produces new offspring that are genetically identical, bulbs are a form of vegetative propagation. Tubers are somewhat similar to bulbs. Tubers, such as potatoes, are enlarged, fleshy, underground stems. While potatoes do not always reproduce by using tubers, if you've ever left a potato for too long, you know that new potato plants can develop from the tuber. These new stems start on the eyes of the potato, and if you plant a potato with new growth from the eyes, a potato plant will develop. We can see the stems starting to develop on the eyes of the potato here. You can even see that leaves have started to develop. Let's now look at two ways stems can be involved in vegetative reproduction. First, rhizomes are horizontal underground stems. These horizontal stems will grow and then develop a new vertical stem at certain critical points. Rhizomes are responsible for the growth of many grasses, sedges, and weeds. The rhizomes grow out from the original plant and invade the nearby soil. They then make new flowering stalks. Even though we think of grasses and weeds most often with this type of vegetative propagation, this method of asexual reproduction can even be seen in irises. Irises can reproduce sexually through pollen and seeds, but sometimes we'll use rhizomes to reproduce as well. This is why you may see a patch of irises growing close together. They're all sharing the same root system. The second type of stem growth we will look at uses stolons, which are horizontal, above-ground stems. These horizontal stems grow along the ground and may develop adventitious roots along with new flowering plant stems. The most common example of stolons can be found in strawberries. Strawberries have runners, which are really stolons, that grow along the ground and continue to develop new flowering stems and roots. Again, this form of vegetative propagation can explain why you will see a large number of strawberry plants in the same area. They're all connected by the stolons. So far, we have looked at naturally occurring forms of vegetative propagation. Let's now consider how humans have used this form of plant reproduction. The most common ways that humans manipulate plants asexually is through grafting and cuttings. Grafting involves the union of different individuals to create a new plant. This can be done at different parts of the plant, but is most often done at the plant stem. One plant is inserted into the stem of another. The point of insertion is called the scion. This method of vegetative propagation is responsible for many hybrid plants, including wine grapes and dwarf fruit trees. Certain grapes grow in specific areas and produce distinctive flavors. In order to create plants that will grow in different areas, humans can graft different varietals together. The same idea comes into play for dwarf fruit trees. These trees produce the same fruits that we love, but are easier to harvest. Cuttings are plant fragments used to grow new plants. Not all plants are capable of developing from a plant cutting. However, certain types of plants, such as herbs and common garden flowers, can be grown from cuttings. Typically, a part of the stem or root is cut and then placed into soil in order to grow. This new cutting will eventually establish roots and a stem. Vegetative propagation in plants allows for the creation of new plants from only one individual. This form of asexual reproduction occurs in plants. Some plants will use both asexual and sexual reproduction. We looked at a few common examples of vegetative propagation. First, we looked at bulbs. Bulbs store energy for plants but can also be used to create new plants. Sometimes when you plant just one bulb, there will be a few plants growing in that specific location a few years later. This is because new bulbs will develop near the node where the leaves grow. These bulbs can then be separated in order to grow more plants. We also looked at tubers such as potatoes. If you've ever left a potato for too long, you know that new plants may grow out of the eyes of the potato. Next, we looked at rhizomes and stolons. Rhizomes are horizontal stems located underground, while stolons are horizontal stems located above ground. Both are used to spread out from the original plant in order to grow new flowering stems along the stretching root. Many grasses and weeds use rhizomes while strawberries use stolons. Lastly, we looked at how humans have used vegetative propagation to create new plants. Grafting involves taking parts of two different plants and putting them together to create one new individual. This is how many different types of grapes for growing wine have been made. Cuttings are sections of plants, normally roots or stems, that can be planted and will grow into new plants on their own. Regardless of the method of vegetative propagation, remember that all forms result in a genetically identical new plant and that this method of reproduction is most useful in stable environments.